Hey guys, welcome back to the Hustlin' Horsepower YouTube channel. We got Straight Gangster up here on the lift at my buddy Donnie's place. We're going to possibly small chance, medium chance. As right now, this may be a medium chance of trying to bring the car out this weekend to the local race. We don't race ever in New York, essentially. We're always traveling. But we do have some family and friends up here and stuff like that, and there's a local race this weekend, just an hour outside of town, I guess you could say. So we do have the borrowed motor from my buddy right here, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because that's what this whole video is about. Prepping this motor to put in here for possibly this weekend. It is a backside race. It's not probably not going to be a super fast race, so I don't have to push it that hard. And Straight Gangster sitting there with the 88s on it, so we might just toss that motor in Straight Gangster today. Today's Wednesday afternoon, and this is the video that I did yesterday for you guys, so like and subscribe. We might see you this weekend. Either way, we will be out there. It is in Brockport, New York, Ledgedale Air Park or something like that. There is a race Saturday and there is a race Sunday. I told some friends that I'd help them out. They're bringing out 3 cars this weekend. They're campaigning 3 cars in the event this weekend, and I told them I'd help them out. So we might bring Straight Gangster out there also, just to see if see what it can do. It's a pretty good chassis. You never know. It doesn't cost us a whole lot to go out there. There's like essentially no travel cost, at least compared to what we're used to traveling, 5, 6, 10 hours to go to a race. This race is only an hour away from where we are right now in Western New York. So this race is between Buffalo, New York and Rochester, New York, just north of there a little bit at Ledgedale Air Park or something like that. It's a $20,000 race on Saturday. I think another like $13,000 to $15,000 on Sunday. So 2 different races. It would be $600 in buy-in money, but essentially no fuel cost to get out there, and no real money to get Straight Gangster together. $50 worth of intake gaskets and a little bit of stuff like that, but nothing, not a whole lot to go out there. So we might just do it and see what Straight Gangster can do out there. Guys, like and subscribe. Well, guys, me and Sexy Rexy are over here playing around. This is the borrowed motor. So it is it's actually a Gen 5 motor. It is not the typical Mark IV big block Chevy that we run, but this is a borrowed motor that is a friend of mine. I'm gonna flip the camera over here and talk about it a little bit, but it is we usually run a TrickFlow 365 head. These are Dart Pro 1 345, so it's a little bit smaller head, a little bit more compression, just some different things here and there, but I'm gonna pull the heads off. I already got the intake off over there, and I got the all the push rods out and the stud girdles and stuff like that off. Let me flip this camera around for you guys. So I got the stud girdles and the rockers off and the valve train out of the thing, and we're gonna get ready to start popping the heads off. Just give it a good inspection. I didn't have the heads off of it when we put it in the motor or in the car for uncaged. This motor should be able to make the 1500 horsepower range. It's got aluminum rods in it, so on and so forth. We'll probably pull the pan off, check a couple bearings, but we're just gonna get over here and give it a good look over. But there's a local race just an hour away this weekend. It is Tuesday afternoon now, and we're debating about running it. It is supposed to be 20,000 at a 32 car field. And then on Sunday, I believe it's supposed to be $13,000 at a 32 car field. And there's a good chance that there's gonna be more cars than that. So we're tempted to toss this sucker in there to run this weekend. At least I am. I'm not feeling the best, but at the same time, that's a lot of freaking money. And we got Straight Gangster over there. That's a pretty dang good chassis over there. We've just been struggling with some motor issues and stuff like that. So, well guys, as I was pulling these heads apart, look at this bottom row here. See how it's only got a couple threads, a whole lot of threads? Well, that guy right there came apart really easy. there was almost no torque or no pressure on the ratchet to get that thing off, probably like 20 or 30 pounds versus, 65 to 70 like the rest of them. So we're gonna have to inspect that a little bit and see what happens. I'm gonna show you something that's a very common mistake, especially when you're putting using head studs and stuff like that with aftermarket heads. You can see here, this nut is still in that stud. You know where that is? That nut is bottomed out on the shank. That means this one wasn't doing crap to hold the head gasket into place. Not only that one, there's this one here, bottomed out on the shank of the stud. This one here, same thing. So right now we got 3 out of 16 of the studs were bottomed out. The nuts were bottomed out on the shank. That's why when I loosened these up, it acted like a bolt, right? But not really. This right here might have torqued, but it didn't have any clamping force. And that's the difference between when you're doing rod stretch on a bolt and you're doing measuring rod stretch and torque. Torque is just a torsional twist, okay? That means this had 0 or very minimal clamping force, but it probably did torque to spec when they put the heads on. That is because this was bottomed out on the shank of the stud. Therefore, it's not clamping no more. It's just stuck. It can't go any farther. There's no more threads for it to engage on. So we're gonna have to go through here, and I'm gonna have to go see if I have some extra hardened washers when we go to put these heads back on. Probably gonna have to double nut these to get these nuts off, or we're gonna have to, unfortunately, might have to use some vice grips or a clamp to hold the stud in place to get these off, because these are probably torqued to 70 pounds just on the threads. And not only does it damage the stud itself, it doesn't hold your head gasket into place. And I'll show you the positioning on these. This is generally on a big block Chevy is a different length stud. This one and this one here are different than this row, and of course the bottom row. But this one here and that one there, you have to be very, very careful on a big block Chevy, because depending on the height of the runners and stuff like that, those tend to be a slightly different length, upwards to a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch different length than the rest of these, the upper studs here. Well, guys, if you've seen in the previous videos, or when Lady Gangster and MVP came in to give me some reinforcements to get this motor in straight Gangster 4 uncaged, you noticed when we started this motor up, it had some pretty good pop to it, pretty good exhaust note to it. You could see the dome on these things. This is probably about 12.5, 13 to 1, depending on the size of the combustion chamber of those heads over there. But you could see here, the cylinder walls look pretty freaking clean. We're gonna roll the motor over. I'll roll the motor over with the ratchet here, and we'll look at the signature of the ring placement. You can only tell the upper ring placement by rolling the motor over like this. But you could see someone spent some time on these pistons. It looks like it was ran on gasoline at one point, probably like a C16 or something like that, because it does have some carbon buildup on here. But everything, there's no real oil in the cylinders or anything like that, so that looks all pretty good. So we might just throw a set of head gaskets on this sucker and see what happens. When you noticed that I talked about that last one, this guy right here isn't fully seated. I don't know why that is. Once we plop the head gasket off, we'll look into that a little bit deeper. But you could see the threads right there, and that's not necessarily a good thing there. But like I said earlier, there's a couple things that we found wrong with this engine assembly process that was done on this motor, but so far so good. It looks like they did spend some time smoothing out all the high spots like I did for my personal motor. These pistons are very, very smooth. They're not naturally smooth, not as smooth like that from the factory. You could see some marks in here from a sander and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with that. They were just smoothing out all the hot spots to make sure it doesn't detonate, to prevent detonation and stuff like that. So we'll roll this motor over a little bit, and then we'll pop the other head off, because that other head is probably going to have the same issues with this one and this one being bottomed out. So guys, on on the internet and stuff like that, you hear a lot of stuff about top fuel hoops. A top fuel hoop is basically just a concentric ring, very similar to what was done on this motor. This is how my motors are done with, this is called a receiver groove in here. There's a small scoring, essentially, in the block that goes perfectly around each cylinder. And then there's going to be some wire ring inside the cylinder head, and we'll look at that in a little bit. But what it does here is it basically lets the cylinder pressure has to go across, down, over, up, and out to seal the cylinder pressure. Unlike a normal head gasket that just seals on a single flat plane, this here has ridges that it has to go through. You can see the machining surface on here isn't perfectly smooth. I don't know if you could see it very well or not, but you can see the small little lines in here. Of course, it's perfectly flat. It's just not perfectly smooth. That helps locate the copper head gaskets here. This right here also adds a little bit of a sealing surface there. This right here, you can see the protrusion on this side. Okay, this would be the downside. You can see the raised lip all the way around the head gasket here. Now you go on this side here, and you'll see the indent from the O-ring inside the cylinder head. So when that goes through there and clamps down, you get these rings in here that adds plenty of material here. So of course you got to run the proper size head gasket. You definitely don't want to have a head gasket that overlaps into the bore, but you also don't want to have a head gasket that's too much oversized that doesn't allow the O-ring to seal in here. Of course, this one right here is probably at least a 65 thousandths, probably more than that, thick head gasket right here, which gives it enough material there to really clamp that. There's nothing wrong with reusing these head gaskets. You could clean them up as long as there's no, what's it called on there? Clean them up. You could scrub them down with a little SOS pad. You're not trying to sand them down, just try to clean them up. Then reseal them and smash them back, lay them back in there. There's nothing wrong with reusing those head gaskets. So we'll go through, put some copper coat on them, clean the decks up real good. We gotta give this guy some attention because that one right here wasn't doing nothing, and we'll have to put a couple extra spacers in these guys and check all that stuff once we go down. So we'll go through and we'll double nut all these. When you do this, you don't want to crunch down in there. A stud is designed to use the threads. So we're just going to go through and make sure these are all seated. Of course, this one needs to get seated probably another quarter inch or so. And then we'll go through, put the head on, make sure they're all aligned. Then we'll clean everything up. And this side is, we'll be ready to slam back together once we clean everything up. I might even go through and clean the tops of the pistons and stuff like that because it'll give me a little bit better plug reading on the plug. But when you're seeing the small little specks on your spark plug, that is part of this stuff. When you start shaking the piston, these little black pieces here will start coming off when you start rattling the piston, and it'll go on your spark plug, and that's what you can see when you're getting really close to detonating your engine. Now that we are on the odd side of the motor, same problem here, but it's only on this one. So it is really, really close. This one did not lock down on the shank of the stud. Maybe it's a slightly shorter stud, or maybe it is just that freaking close to bottoming out. So we'll go through here. This one's definitely going to need a double stud. So this stud here is the back stud on that side because they're not completely symmetrical, right? When this head goes on that side, this side goes over there. So this one's going to be slightly lower in the machining process. So on a big block Chevy, these are generally the same height. These are generally the same height. That one's an oddball. These four down here are the same height. And on my motors, we generally run studs, which would be here and here. This is a prime example to show you guys. Of course, there's going to be a head stud here. But when you do this, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you're missing this one here. This lug right here is to go into the intake runner of the cylinder head, as you can see right here. Not in all cases, but it wouldn't be a bad idea if this was drilled and tapped into the intake runner here, so that we could have another stud here. You can see the embossment in the cylinder head itself to accept that. So that's not something we're going to do because it is a borrowed motor, but it is a good safety precaution to have that extra 6 head stud in there to help seal that head gasket. Well, guys, we saw the receiver grooves in the cylinder heads, but guess what? There's no damn O-rings in these cylinder heads. So whoever assembled this motor previously used a receiver groove without an O-ring. That just doesn't make any sense to me, because the O-ring, you could run O-rings without a receiver groove, but a receiver groove without O-rings, to me, that's just like that doesn't sound like a good idea. You don't have anything pressing into the indent, okay? If it's protruded, like O-ring sticks out of the head, right? I'll show you on my TrickFlow 365 sitting over here. Those are a pretty good head. The O-ring sticks out something like 25, 30 thousandths, all right? Something like that. I'd have to get the mic to measure for sure. We could do that as a little experiment. But this right here is flat, and you can see these rings around here. If you look very closely, it is absolutely pouring outside. I'm gonna pause for a second. Now that torrential downpour subsided for a second, we can get back to the video. You could see these rings right here. If you could look real closely, you could see these rings right here. So we're gonna go through, and that indent is in the head gaskets that came off the motor. So I need to match those up to the O-rings on my TrickFlow heads. If those O-rings match up perfectly, well then we can put the TrickFlow heads on that block, and in my opinion, the TrickFlow heads are better than these Dart Pro 1s here. This is a 365cc runner. You can see it's CNC'd intake runners here, and they are 100% fresh. So I got them sitting on here. You can see all the studs will work. All the lengths are right on the studs. So I can go and put my stainless rockers on these and my stud mount and stuff like that. That stuff is all sitting in the prison bus, I believe. So I'd have to run back to my mom's and get that stuff. But that's stuff that could get knocked out after the cylinder heads are on. So I'm gonna go and pull this cylinder head off here. Sorry, I don't have a tripod and working by myself. But I'm feeling definitely not good today. But I'm not the type of person that could sit around for it's been like 4 weeks now. So if we can just basically toss a set of heads on this thing and slide this motor back in between the frame rails, well then my thought process on that is we could go out this weekend, see how the car works, see how happy the car is, and maybe head to War in the Woods next weekend, sell some merchandise, hang out with some friends, mostly hang out with some friends and watch some racing. That would be the main goal, but I'm just not the best spectator. I appreciate all of you guys that come out and spectate with us. Travel 6-8 hours to come see us race and stuff like that. That means the world to me. But I like racing too. So I'm gonna pull the cylinder head off, flip it over here, and match it up with the intake or the head gasket, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that the O-ring lines up perfectly in the center of the receiver groove on the cylinder. So guys, I went and grabbed a couple spare studs and stuff like that, and you can see here, all right, you got the dowel pins lined up, you got a couple studs in there. Now it's going to be hard to do this with one hand, but it is registered. When you put pressure on here, it only moves back and forth a couple thousandths when it's registered in there. So I'm gonna go through with the micrometer and measure it just to double check it. But it does seem that these O-rings here are lining up inside that groove there. So if that is the case, this O-ring and this O-ring, this receiver groove are the same size. That means this O-ring here will line up inside the receiver groove in the block here. That will really lock in these cylinder heads. And that'd be enough for, we could push 25, 30 pounds of boost. as much as we want to in this block, I guess you could say. But I think we're onto something here to be able to put my trick flow heads on the borrowed short block, and we'll have the best of both worlds, and we'll have a really good set of heads on a motor that's got some fair amount of pop in it. And if we run those BorgWarner 88s that we just put on the car, it'll make as much power as we want to make with it. So guys, I got a micrometer here, and we're gonna go through. I already measured it. We can get this image in here. There we go. If you can see, that's the center of the bore here. You can check in multiple areas. Okay, that is the center to center there. Now we can go over here and measure center to center of the O-ring. And you can see how that lays on there perfectly. Okay, so just by dumb luck, I guess you could say, generally big block Chevy, they're all about the same. At least this bore size, because these are within 20 thousandths of the bore. So the machine shop that did the work on these heads, and whoever did the work on this motor, did the receiver grooves and the O-rings to the same size. So that's just, I guess that's standard for the size of bore of this motor. And it looks like that's gonna fall into place just perfectly. So we're gonna go and check a couple more of them, and we should be in business. All right guys, by going with the 365 heads, I get to run these extra head studs here. You can see that it's in there, and then once the washer goes on there, and you put a nut on here, and it gives that extra stud here. So as you can see here, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this stud will come up through here once the head goes on and bolts into the intake runner on these 365 heads. You can see the embossments here, and they're drilled out, so we can run those extra studs there.